Hello, Nasdaq followers, and welcome to another edition of Behind the Bell. I'm your host, Lyanne Alfaro. We are coming to you live from Times Square, New York City, where we're getting ready to ring the closing bell with Applied Therapeutics IPOing on the Nasdaq earlier this year. Joining me right now is Shoshana Shendelman, who is founder and CEO. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So talk to us a little bit more about Applied Therapeutics. What is the mission and the vision?
So Applied Therapeutics was founded specifically to bring drugs to high unmet need indications, so fatal or debilitating diseases where there are no treatments available. And our thinking is that drug development for high unmet need indications doesn't necessarily need to take the standard, long, costly approach that people are used to, a decade in development and $1 billion. There are ways to develop drugs more quickly and more effectively, especially when we're dealing with fatal or debilitating diseases that have no treatments available. So we're actually able to bring drugs through development more urgently for patients. And currently, our lead indications are galactosemia, which is a rare metabolic disease that affects children and adults, and diabetic cardiomyopathy, which is a fatal fibrosis of the heart that happens in diabetics. After that, we're moving on, so our pipeline includes additional drugs to treat retinopathy and orphan pediatric leukemias and lymphomas. So we're really targeting diseases where there's nothing available, and we think that there are ways to apply new science to bring treatments to those patients quickly and effectively.
In terms of the diseases that you target, who else is in this space and how do you distinguish yourself from the competition, or is this completely new territory?
In a lot of ways, in most of the indications that we're targeting, we're the only people there, and that's why it's a high unmet need indication. Because in these cases, there's nothing available, and in many cases, and certainly the case for diabetic cardiomyopathy and galactosemia, there haven't been any drugs developed there either. So it's really an open space, which is a good position to be in from a business perspective, but it highlights the point even more so that these patients need drugs developed in those diseases.
And in general, for the biopharma space, how have you seen it change over the last couple of years and ever since Applied Therapeutics has been in this industry?
I think that a lot of people are realizing that the status quo for drug development of, decades and billions of dollars is not going to be viable in the long term. As we think about the evolution of the healthcare system and also new opportunities that are emerging in biotech. So we definitely have this strategy. We're executing on it. We've successfully brought drugs through development and are now in sort of the last stages with our lead drugs. And I think that people are sort of realizing that this is a place where change can happen.
And talk to us about the trajectory forward. So the next 3 to 5 years, what will that look like for Applied Therapeutics?
Well, we have our large readout on galactosemia happening very soon. So hopefully we'll read out that data and we'll move towards the next phases of commercialization if that study is positive. And in the meantime, we're moving forward our phase 3 study in diabetic cardiomyopathy. So it's really a turning point for us on sort of proof of concept in early stage development to we're now in late stage and we're moving towards commercialization, and then also moving our other drugs through the pipeline in early stage so that we can continue to address other diseases in the future.
Expanding a little bit more on the listing here, the listing on Nasdaq, what does that signify for where the company is and what kind of milestone is that?
So it's very exciting. It's exciting for any company to IPO, and being listed on the Nasdaq has been very important to us. Clinical trials are not cheap. So the ability for us to raise capital in the public markets to continue our development programs has been really critical to us, and we're very excited to be listed on the Nasdaq.
And a big part of this equation now moving forward are the investors.
Yeah.
So what major catalysts will investors be taking a look at in the coming year for APLT?
So I think people are very focused on the galactosemia data readout. People know that's happening and watching for it soon. And as we move into diabetic cardiomyopathy, that's a little bit of a longer study. So we initiated that in September. And I think a catalyst there will be hopefully being fully enrolled in 2020, which sort of starts the clock ticking on the primary endpoint there, so that investors know when to expect the readout on that study. It's a 15-month primary endpoint. So I think as we look at 2020, there's a lot happening in galactosemia. There's, of course, our data readout happening soon, and then sort of the movement into commercial phase with galactosemia, and then diabetic cardiomyopathy taking that last step forward in the final stages of phase 3.
Well, Shoshana, we look forward to keeping up with updates from Applied Therapeutics as well as how the readout progresses. But in the meantime, on to the closing bell right here at the Nasdaq market site. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Nasdaq followers, please stay tuned for the closing bell happening in just a few minutes right here at the Nasdaq market site in Times Square. Until then, we are signing off.